The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Mann, the host for today's webinar. I have my co-chair with me, Sadita Hassi, and our speaker, Linda. We represent the Human Development and Leadership Division of the American Society for Quality. This is a global division aiming to enrich the personal and professional lives of our members and non-members, the global community to trump over current and future challenges. We continuously look for new speakers within the range of our body of knowledge, which can be found on our website. We host monthly webinars, so if you're interested or someone you know that is interested, we would be happy to review their application. The Book of Knowledge can be found on ASQ Community. Before we begin the webinar, let me go over the housekeeping and some webinar rules. If there is any question, please type under the question sections and we will answer them. Webinar will be held for 45 minutes and then Q&A time for 15 minutes. If you want continuing education credit for 0.1 CEU, you have to be on the webinar for at least 40 minutes. You will receive a dedicated email from us, which you can save as PDF and send it to ASQ to claim your credit. So now let me introduce you to our speaker, Linda Stacy. Linda Stacy is a productivity consultant, speaker, and author who created her proprietary model, the How Advantage, to help people, teams, and organizations optimize their performance. Her firm is keenly focused on increasing capacity and fulfillment of individuals at all levels within organizations. For more than 15 years, Linda has worked at strategy consulting firms, serving clients from pharmaceuticals and industrial to consumer, aviation, and tech. Linda is certified in instrumental design, has a Bachelor of Arts in Biology from UC Santa Barbara, and an MS in Library Science from Simons University. Linda, it's a heavy-packed, awesome bio. I'm looking forward to hear you, so the floor is all yours.
All right. Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here today. As we get started, I wanted to just do a brief agenda, a brief setting of the stage. We're going to start out by gauging the status quo, what's currently happening, whether it's inside your work life, your work environment, or even as it kind of spills into your home life. We'll be talking about a three-part actionable framework. It's simple in its approach, but it has a lot of room for the complexity and dynamism that's in our lives. And we'll also be looking at some conclusions and takeaways, and of course have time for the questions towards the end. So today's goal is, despite our distracted, overconnected, and interrupted workplaces, how can we have more time and space to lead, to innovate, to create, to have the type of work that we want, to increase our capacity and make it all more fulfilling, and I'd even say fun at the same time. So just to get started, I'm hoping we can have a little bit of engagement here with the community. I would love it if we would consider an ideal work morning. If you've had one, or if you think of how a work morning could be in its ideal sense, what would those components be? How would it flow? What would happen? What wouldn't happen? What activities characterize a really satisfying, successful morning at work? So there was a handout provided with this presentation, and if you didn't get it ready ahead of time, that's okay. You could use any piece of paper. But I'm essentially going to start building three columns, and this is the first, column A, where we kind of jot down a few things that if they happen, you can have maybe a better day, or you can at least try to plan and attempt to arrange how your day is going to lay out. So if folks could, I would love it if you could go to the chat box and comment. And I know we referred to the question box a moment ago, but in the chat box, if folks would enter one or two ideal morning activities, what are the things that you can do that usually will ensure that you're set up for success? So are we seeing anything? Are folks entering into the chat box? I'd love to see some.
And Linda, we wanted to remind that I did send an email a couple of minutes ago, actually, to everyone with a handout. But there is also a handout section in the tool here, so they could refer to that as well.
Excellent. Are there any comments? I'm not seeing anything coming in. Are you, Karen?
I think they're using the question box, but you could use the chat as well.
Okay.
So if you want that to be shared, please use the chat. What was the question? The question, can you repeat the question, please?
The question is, what are the activities that, if you were to have an ideal work morning, what constitutes that for you? Or what happens or doesn't happen?
Would you like to read some from the handout?
Sure, I will go on to the next slide.
We're not seeing the slide share. Are you sharing your?
You can't see my presentation right now?
No, only the first one.
Oh, interesting. You see the picture of me, but you're not seeing anything past that.
Just the first slide, not even the picture.
Linda, only the cover page is visible right now.
Okay. Well, I am not sure what I can do here.
Kieran, would you like to share your screen?
Yeah. Give me a second.
Thank you.
I'll make you a presenter. Okay, so
if you want,
we have some responses, like every morning, Evernote morning journal, right when I get to work. We have somebody already planning here. Some quiet time to organize the day. That's a good one too. Planning for the day when driving. Well, that's dangerous. Well, unless a self-driving car. And then we have a brisk walk in the morning when the weather permits. Planning time. Yep.
Okay.
Answer the 10 emails that came in the last night.
Yes, yes, that's common too.
Complete my work day, startup ritual, get to work early before everyone else, and try Gmail, start to work on my to-do list, attend the meeting. We have many people who are already organizing. Ideally, I have 15 minutes to organize my daily task and ensure I'm prepared for my meetings and conversations. Also try to take a few minutes of walk around and greet my team. Coffee, too.
Yes, no, those are all fantastic. If you want to advance, I'm on the slide that has poll at the top and it says gauging the status quo. So a little bit further in, maybe. Okay, and then past that, this is what we just did.
Gonna go full screen.
Okay, that blue screen that you were just past is the one. Is that right? Sorry, we went this. Okay, so right here, we go full screen. It looks like many people had results that are in the first category here. So I think there was at least one person said something about meeting with folks, and at least one person said something about email review. And I heard brisk walk, I heard coffee. So it looks like we've covered all of the major categories. Of course, this isn't what happens every day, right? So if we go to the next slide.
Would you like to launch the poll, or?
Yeah, so we'll just read through this first and then we can launch the poll. So you're considering what you wrote down for that ideal work morning activities, and assuming that not every morning is ideal, what are the types of things that get in the way? So you've got all these wonderful things in column A that if you do them, you'll have a great week or a great day. But what gets in the way of that actually happening? So you can write it down on your handout, but also we're going to launch a poll to look at some top derailers.
And there's something for them to do with the handout, right?
Yes, but the poll would also support at this point.
Okay, so let's try that. Let's launch one of the polls, and you guys can respond in the system. So now you can respond to this poll.
So this is the first
see
question.
An average. So these are the activities that you mostly or ideally.
Yes, these are the ideal
basically.
items. Yes.
Okay, many people voting, so we'll give it a few seconds here. Okay, we have about 60% of people voted. Still some more. I think we have a good response, so. Okay, let's just close it. And we have interesting results. 50% is a priorities list, planning, reflecting, and or brainstorming. 40, the second one, actually, it's a 24% email review and or other update message. Check. Then the third one is a team meeting, collaboration, connecting with colleagues. 12% proper sleep or exercise. 0% great coffee or smooth commute.
Well, that's
okay. I don't know what's going on here.
Well, I did have to pick the best one, so maybe
we should have listed tea as well. I'm a tea person.
All right.
Okay, so let's just hide. Kieran, are you ready for presentation? We'll close the poll. Okay.
Okay, so now thinking about those interruptions, there are lots of things that tend to get in our way. Sometimes email can become a disruptor. Sometimes we're choosing the easy task over more challenging tasks. Sometimes we have office environments or chit chat, things that are not conducive to focused work. Sometimes we have no plan. Sometimes folks on our team may have no plan, or people that we're working for have no plan, and that can get in our way. Procrastination, a lot of people, when I do private or anonymous polls, really do mark procrastination pretty high. There are, almost all of us suffer from various forms of personal derailment, self-sabotage. Sometimes, depending on how customer focused we are, or even if we have internal customers or clients, that can be a big source of distraction, depending. I mean, it's a crucial part of our job sometimes. Multitasking can in the way, and as well as changing priorities and unplanned work. So if we will continue, if we look at part 3 here, if you consider your answers for column A and then the things that tend to fall in column B, so I ask audiences, what's the consequence of this when too many things from column B are getting in the way of column A? And so if we think about some of those negative consequences, you can jot down what some might be for you, and then we'll talk about what they commonly are. I have several listed on the next slide. This is something I do in an interactive way when I'm live in front of a group, it's really interesting to see how audiences react to these types of discussions. So most of the content on the slides comes straight from live audience. So if you advance to the next slide. So poor preparation, stress, being overworked, low productivity, poor results, lost money and time, missed deadlines, and compromised relationships. And a lot of the things that I talk about to audiences they're kind of chronic, insidious issues that can happen in an organization. They might not be the top, most obvious thing that's causing a compromised client or customer relationship, but over time these can kind of really derail and lower engagement of the workforce, which is something that most of us would want to avoid. I certainly don't want to spend 45 hours of my life in an unengaging type of environment or workspace. So now just debriefing what we did with column A, B, and C, if we advance to the next slide. usually what people identify for column A, and today I did it as, what would constitute a really awesome morning. Sometimes I'll ask audiences, what would you do if you had extra time, or how would you see the value of what you do in an organization? I'm basically trying to ask a question that reveals what is most valuable, what would lead to growth, whether it's in your environment or in your life, what nourishes either a department or an individual to continue in their growth, what leads to more creation and more play and more innovation. When we're in this more creative and innovative state, this is really where we do our best work. So column A is awesome. When we advance to column B, usually the things that show up here are, they're chores, the to-dos, the stuff of life, certainly not things that we can eliminate necessarily. Sometimes they're quite necessary to support us, but there are things sometimes in this column that we can say no to or we can get better at. If we manage it well, we do much better. If we're not managing it well, these things become blocks or impact our ability for column A items to really come through. And then when we look at column C, this is really the risk, the consequence, the business impact and the liability. Again, where poor quality, missed deadlines, and compromised relationships. They could be inside the organization, within teams, or team to team, and sometimes they're even with our customers. If over time they begin to, look for other vendors, perhaps, if work is continually delayed or of poor quality. So that's a little debrief, and something on the next slide that I like to do with groups, whether they're talking about their work life or their home life, is create a bit of a success equation where you're taking things from column A and from column B, and then you're deciding what you don't want anymore in column C. So imagine a world where you're achieving all the growth that you want in your organization, and your every morning is well planned and highly prioritized. You're comfortably managing the interruptions and the commute, or you're getting your exercise in, and you've really reduced the stress or the impact, whatever that negative impact is that's being caused. And when people really get this on paper, it's going to depend on you individually how critical this is. Sometimes folks are in a really uncomfortable, painful, they don't like work, or the home life is terrible. Something really needs to change, so that whatever comes into C can sometimes be the impetus to start changing some behaviors so that B is easier and that A is actually happening more and more. So if we'll advance to the next slide, we look at the model here for the how advantage, and the three main parts are assessing, deciding, and execute. So we will go through this in just a moment, and I have a poll on the next slide where I'd like you to rate yourself in terms of how you feel that you're able to achieve those mornings that you really want, and in how you're able to mitigate what can get in the way. So I believe there's a poll set up. How do you rate yourself? Yes. Your ability to get what, go ahead.
Yeah, we have categorized it, so it's 1 to 3, and continues. You can start voting. Okay, that's going fast. Interesting. So some voting, 73%. We don't see the names, so
good, yeah.
Be as true as you can. Okay, so we'll close it. We're 77% who voted.
That's great.
And here we go. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay, so 55% are 5 to 6, slightly above average. We have some optimism going on. Good. We have 22% at 7 to 10, high performing, and slightly below average, same percentage. And 2% is 1 to 3.
Okay.
So it looks like a quite good group here.
Okay, so I'll just say one thing about that, and then we'll go to the next poll, actually. I think as humans, I I believe that we all have the potential to grow and expand. So even the highly performing people, I found actually sometimes the highly performing people want even more tips and tricks to be even more highly performing. So no matter where you fall on this, there's always room for some.
Linda, you're breaking. We cannot hear you, Linda. Linda, we can't hear you, but you could re-log in. In the meantime, we can run the second poll. Okay, so let's see. The first poll was about ourselves. I don't know how much of it, and maybe we can check with Linda later, how much of it is kind of overestimating how we rank ourselves. And we'll go to the next one, which is about the team. So how do you rate your team and work environment? Let's see how that goes. I just launched the poll. Okay, so you can start voting. That's going fast too. We have same ranking.
Gone?
Linda, you're back. So we're launching the second. Yes, we're launching the second poll to see how they evaluate their team and work environment in the meantime.
Fantastic.
To have some results, so you can then talk to it.
Thank you.
We have about 70% voting. We'll give it last seconds. Let's say they estimate themselves a little bit better. So I'll close that. Okay, we have 76% voting, and then we'll share the results. 47%, 5 to 6, which is kind of similar to ourselves voting. 34%, 4 to 5. Then we have 11%, 7 to 10, and 8%, 1 to 3. So more people in that area.
Yep.
And we'll close that, and we can give it back to you.
Okay, fantastic. And hopefully we won't lose the sound again. I apologize. We're getting live indicators of derailers, right? Derailing my presentation. So
we're getting highly technical here.
yes, but I, got to keep going through, right? Manage those obstacles. So as organizations, just like with individuals, you're either growing or you're dying, right? So whether you're talking about your internal department or the organization overall, always an opportunity to grow and to work more seamlessly as a team to get key results. So if we advance to the next slide, I wanted to mention.
And Kira, next one, please. Yep.
So, I get this question a lot. Sometimes I'll have folks in my audience who, depending on the nature of things, we're either talking more about home life and how that is impacting our ability to do good work or vice versa. But I mean, I know for me personally, when there's a number of impacts that don't allow me to get to work in the way that I'm really ready, it can really lead to a frazzled environment in the office. So any of the tips and tools that I'm talking about in this presentation can be applied to home life as well as work life. I really believe that, balance isn't really a thing. I think that the two sides are very integrated these days. And basically we have to decide what we want in both portions of our life and then do our best to kind of make that happen. And that does feed into the how advantage and the D, the decide portion. So I just wanted to make a comment about that in terms of whatever's going on for you, whether it's work or home, that you can use these tools for either environment. So if we move on to the next slide, again, just looking at the diagram for the how advantage. And looking at assess, decide, and execute, A, D, E. We already did one form of assessment by doing this ABC matrix, and you can do that for anything in your life. So just forward one slide. So one slide forward. Yeah, there we go. Sorry. You can really do this, you know, for your home life or for your work life, and think about the things that you want to bring into work or life, things that should be emphasized. I'm going to give an example in the next slide of where this process was used in a small team environment. So this is about a group of 7 in an internal team in a company, and they're having their annual, you know, get together. And how I conducted it was I gave each person 3 3x5 cards, and they were able to write on the card whatever they felt the key value of the, if you can go back to the one that had the flip chart on it, that's what I'm still talking about. The flip chart on the window. I think it's one more back. Might be a little bit of a delay. So I had each member talk about what the key value or the key role was for the department. And they wrote it on the 3x5 card. And then I, not knowing what any of their handwriting looked like, put those all on a wall while they were doing another activity. And then we could kind of see where there was alignment and where there wasn't alignment. So if people didn't agree on what the key role or value was of the department to the organization, it became very, very obvious. This forced the team to get on the same page in terms of what they were doing, what their purpose was inside the organization. You know, Covey says that out of a team of 11, if you think of a soccer team, only 4 of them actually typically in an organization know where the goal is. That's a little bit of an analogy, but this study's been done again and again and again. We get team members to actually self-proclaim what they're there for. It can really vary. This can be a big problem in terms of productivity and getting the right things done. So after we do that part of the exercise, we talk about the derailers, what's getting in the way of our value being seen in the greater organization. Maybe there isn't an issue, but maybe there is, or maybe you need to increase that value or make it more known. And then, of course, we talk about C, what are the consequences if our key role and value isn't understood in an organization? And I mean, there's a lot of functional groups and organizations that sometimes could be consumed by another group if you're not really clear on how you differentiate. So this was a way to kind of look at what could be at risk, but then also with column B, we were able to decide what makes sense to get started on first. You know, gave us some actionable framework. And I wanted to share a couple statistics. They're not on a slide here, but Deloitte several years ago, actually Deloitte in the last year put out a report, and I can share any of these if anyone's interested, talking about problems as they're known to leadership in an organization. And these statistics are kind of staggering, but top leaders typically on average are aware of 4% of the problems in an organization. Going down from there, middle managers aware of about 9% of problems in an organization. Supervisors, it jumps up quite a bit to 74%. And then, of course, the front line is 100% aware of all the problems happening in an organization. Now, some of this is, you know, it's kind of okay because what problems do top leaders need to be focused on? Certainly, they can't be focused on everything, but there still is, you know, an issue here as to what the front lines are able to express going up the chain. And I feel that this way of assessing around a table and giving people a voice is an awesome way to uncover what could be a bigger problem maybe than, or a problem that might be on the verge of really becoming serious. So this is an area of study for me, and I'm actually going to be doing an insights research project on it. And if anyone wanted to be involved in that, I would love to connect on how this variance and understanding of problems in an organization really impact organizations in quite a negative way. So I'll try to get back to where we are in the presentation here. This is great. Okay, perfect in terms of what slide we're on. I showed you a way of doing an assessment, and now deciding, just by doing that success equation a little while ago, that's one form of making decisions around our life or around what we want to do within our team, or what the critical paths are within our team. Is there really just one key priority, or are we trying to do too many things, or are they aligned in the right way? The second bullet here, creating an ABC matrix, this is more of a personal thing. You could do that process with your career. What would you like to see in your career in 5 years? What might be getting in the way with that? And then, what's the risk? Maybe you don't want to be where you are 5 years from now. Maybe it's fine to be where you are because other things are taking priority in your life. You can do the same thing with physical, with relationship, just overall well-being. It's kind of cool just to think about what you'd like to create in your life, what's getting in the way of it, and then moving towards that. And the third bullet, how you want to show up in the world or at your workplace. Those are some ways of deciding. So on the next screen, it's interesting to kind of measure yourself as far as, are you really clear on what you want in those various aspects of your life? If you're really, really overwhelmed, you might not be super clear on the top priorities. So some of these methods could be good. If your team's really overwhelmed, it could just be, you need to kind of step back, do an assessment, and understand the resources. You really need to decide, because resources at the end of the day are limited. We only have so many bodies in a building. We only have so much time. So we're going to really try to make the right decisions, prioritize, and then execute to the best of our ability. So now moving on to the this last piece of the framework is to execute. So on the next slide here, execution is really a couple of things: maintaining or increasing your focus and reducing those derailers. Of course, your priorities have to be straight too. You kind of have to have some clarity around the priorities as you get going with this. So how do we increase focus and reduce the obstacles? I'm going to give a couple of execution tips that I have found to be extremely important and valuable in my life and in the lives of a lot of people who are managing a lot of things. And it sounds like a lot of you are doing these anyway, but maybe you'll hear something new. And I'd also like to suggest, if you feel like there are people on your team or your environment that are struggling in some of these areas, sometimes internal mentorship is really important. And a lot of the things that I talk about aren't really formally ever talked about in work or onboarding programs. So people who are new to their career sometimes aren't really told that, it's okay to sit down and do some planning, or you schedule some time, block your time in a calendar for your own prioritization. Even if you are kind of following orders, at the early stages of your career, it's still good to sit back and decide what you'd like your day to look like. So advancing just one slide to calendar blocking, the two tips I'm giving here are on the handout that's provided. I have 9 tips in total, but I'm just going over 2 of them a little bit. Actually, a couple of them are like a combination of those 9 tips. And I'm going to say this in an upcoming slide, but these tips have been expanded into a book, an ebook that is coming out in the next month and a half, which I'm making available to anyone who's listening to this webinar. But I'll give you instructions on that in just a minute. So talking about calendar blocking, the key here, and again, I'm so excited to know that many of you see this as a key part of your day. But looking out a week ahead, I feel, is a really awesome thing to do. I try to do it on a Thursday. It doesn't always happen the same day every week, because I think all of us have weeks that are not exactly the same. So on a Thursday, I will set some time and it doesn't have to be a lot of time, 15, 20 minutes to look out a week ahead, maybe 2 weeks ahead if I know that things are very busy. I still use a paper planner for this process. I use something called the Planner Pad, which has been working really well for me for about 5 years. And I share those details about the actual tool that I'm using. Tools are not as important though as getting your priorities accomplished though, just a sharing of a tool that works for me. So I use the Planner Pad, but I refer to my electronic calendars, and I take those hard appointments and such and put them into my written form, and then I see what else is happening around there. And one thing that sometimes we don't give enough time or mind space to how much time it takes to get ready to do the things that we have to do, whether it's, get ready to go to work in the morning, and a sleep time and just, all the preparation for like the things that we don't pay that much attention to. Sometimes they really add up. So weighing in all the time it takes just to get ready for the main activities of life, and being sure that, you have whatever food you want available. If you're going to try to work at an exercise routine on top of that, you're just adding more and more to all this like extra stuff that has to get done. So I'm looking at all of that as I look at the week ahead. And then what I love to see is where the big open blocks of time are left, where I can start filling in some of those A column activities, whether it's key work projects, like the ones that really require the most bandwidth of my brain and energy, or if it's me wanting to schedule some exercise or me wanting to schedule a date night, whatever that is, you know, I'm looking for those blocks of times to fill in ways with the things that are from column 1 that are of highest value according to what I've decided for myself, or what my team or organization has decided is most valuable for me to produce at work. So I do the blocking. And then, you know, as you move forward and you get to the next week, it's important to look back, you know, at the prior week. Sometimes, you know, we only are able to get, excuse me, 65% of what was scheduled done. Things come up. Sometimes we've overscheduled ourselves. So that looking back is an important part of this process too, because for one thing, we can kind of pat ourselves on the back for the 65% or the 85% of what did happen. But we can also say, you know what, this was really unrealistic, this other thing that I tried to do. I'm going to have to adjust my expectations going forward, or, you know, figure out a better way, or say no to something. So the post is really important too, the post review. And then, you know, doing that daily preview is an extra bonus, which a lot of you mentioned already, which is awesome. And sometimes you almost need to do that preview before you leave the house, or if you are on a train, you know, you could actually do it during your commute. I don't recommend a ton of it during the if you're driving, but it's nice to be able to do that thinking, or just that little review of the calendar before you get into the office and you get distracted. And then the timing techniques. So we have a picture of the Pomodoro. This is, tomato timer, and this is because an Italian college student in the 80s found that if he set his kitchen Italian, or his tomato timer to 25-minute increments, he could be extremely efficient with his studies, and he made himself not be distracted by anything. Now, in the 80s, I don't know what he would have been distracted by, other than maybe some volume of his peers, or a television perhaps. Didn't have all of the things blinking and ringing at him that we have today. So, you know, you can turn off alerts, or you can, you know, reduce them to some extent. I mean, with my Outlook, for example, I still see the envelope in my inbox at the bottom, but I don't get the pop-up that tells me who it's from and like the subject. I really found that that's highly effective for me, not to be looking at those all of the time. You know, turning off the sound on the phone, these things, unless you're in an emergency situation and you know you have to be highly reactive, right? But even 25-minute increments, you'd be amazed at what you can accomplish in that time if you just allow yourself the focus. The idea is that you would take a 5-minute break in between and then engage in another 25 minutes. But of course, your schedules and your meetings and all this is going to kind of dictate. But the lesson here really is shutting down distractions and focusing on one task at a time, especially for those that really require your best work and your best thinking. And I've also mentioned next actions at the top of this slide, and David Allen from Getting Things Done talks about next actions quite a bit. And in most of my career in my life, I've even if it's a very long and intricate project, I feel like I can only work on things for short periods of time. Sometimes it's, you know, 2 blocks of 25. Sometimes I get more on certain days. But many of us are working on many projects and we have to stop. We're interrupted by things. And I like to be able to jump right back into that as easily as possible when that next chunk comes up on my calendar. So instead of me and my little blocking in the calendar, instead of me writing a title for some project title that I'm working on, I'll actually write like the next thing to start working on, or pick up where I left off. An example I gave last week was, you know, if I was a conference organizer, I wouldn't write, you know, work on conference in that section. I would say, you know, am I doing speaker bios this week? Or, you know, what am I doing? Am I doing PR outreach? Just something much more specific than the overall project, right? Really what makes sense to happen next in that. And those 2 timing techniques are awesome. I mean, sorry, those 2 execution techniques are awesome. And I'll also say that the Pomodoro, even if you're not, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, but they can be really great if you suffer from procrastination around certain types of projects. Usually procrastination happens because a project is amorphous, kind of ambiguous. It looks like it's not going to be finished for a long time, so it's not very satisfying. We don't want to engage in it because it's just going to be so long before it's really any fun, or you get that mark of completion, which is what we all like, right? We like to complete things because we get that happy hormone dopamine hit every time we check something off. That's also the reason why we're prone to answer quick emails instead of work on a really intricate problem at work. So it can really help with procrastination because your mind can handle, I'm only going to work on this awful project for 25 minutes. I can handle 25 minutes. So you buy in, and what happens 9 times out of 10 is that once you're into it, you're kind of okay and you can keep going. And as an aside, I've actually used this with exercise in the past. There were a couple of times in my life where I thought I wanted to be a runner and really kind of detested that activity. So I'll run for 5 minutes and see how it goes. And usually by 5 to 7 minutes, I was into it enough that I could keep going. But it's a brain trick. Our minds sometimes get in our way. It's a whole other talk I do about our brains and our biology. But however you can calm your brain down so that you can actually get your work done, I'm all over it. Okay, so the next slide is telling you how you could get the book that is about to come. I'd say it's going to be about 6 weeks before I am mailing this out to people who want it. So you can simply email me. My email address is there. It's linda@livingblueprints.com. And it's also on the handout. You should be able to find my email other places as well. But there's no E in blue. Watch for that. So linda@livingblueprints.com, and you can put in the subject line ASQ ebook, and I will acknowledge your email now, but then send the ebook when it is officially ready to be sent. And I'm happy to share that with anyone who would like it. And at this point, I believe I am open for some questions. Hopefully we've had some come in. Or they could start asking them now.
We're just announcing them, so yes, they can use the chat, not the chat box, actually, the question box.
Okay.
That's where we'll receive the questions. And I'm happy you went over this webinar. In the meantime, I did go and multitask myself, which is not good. So what is it that there is so many, all are good reasons of, and we all know what's happening that it's triggering it. And I believe you mentioned that in the handout as well, which I was going over it a little bit more in detail. Is it like we can't sustain it? Like there's so many tools out there? Is it like too many tools to try to keep track of them, or long-term sustainability?
Are you referring to distraction and the
to whatever plan? I would say to whatever plan that we decide, okay, this is going to work for me, then making it sustainable.
Okay, gotcha. I think the key is, part of this is that folks will sometimes get too perfectionistic about the tool or the process or the, whether it's the calendar tool or the note-taking app or the whatever it is. And I think that those things fluctuate as you go through your career. You try new tools, and different things work for you depending on where you are. And I really think it's about going back to, if you've defined really well if the things that are in column A are actually happening in your life. So, if you're a parent and your children are like a key part of your life, and but you can't do every last thing for your kids, right? So you can't measure success by, have I attended every single event and, like been there for, you really have to measure success in a different way. So I think that sustainability is around really getting clear on what's important and wanting to drive something better for yourself. If you don't want to, if the status quo is okay, then you just continue as is, right? Part of something I say a lot to groups is, there's effort either way. You can either put some effort into the front half by, doing a little bit of planning and deciding about what you'd like your life to look like. And that's effort, that's work. Or you can kind of suffer the consequences of chaos on the other end, which is really where my whole journey started in building this business, was that I was in constant state of overwhelm and nothing was good anymore. Work didn't feel good, life, nothing felt good. So it kind of, if you're not feeling anything either extreme, then you might people might not change, you know, but if you want to make a difference, you're constantly checking back in to what your priorities are and seeing if you're in line, and measuring something. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just some kind of like, I'm getting better in some capacity. I don't know if that helps answer that.
Yes, and so when you mentioned prioritization, another question that comes to me is redefining what's important to us and or to the job or wherever area that is. But also I feel like sometimes we end up doing things that were not really important to us because maybe we don't really do things that are important to us. Like if you are really following a passion job, I think it drags you itself. It's kind of self-explanatory that if this is your priority. Do you feel like that happens? Like, is that related anyhow, that the jobs that we do are not always linked to what we really want to do? Which is kind of another topic altogether, but
yeah, that's a huge topic. It's a huge thing. I am of the belief that you can find some amount of engagement in almost any job. I hate to say that for any, but usually there can be some improvement in your experience of any job. But I mean, it's hard for me to see that a person would be able to do the same thing forever, you know? I mean, it certainly happens, and some people are very comfortable with that, but it also depends on your background and where you've come from, and what you believe is possible even, right? So, but I do believe that no matter where you are in an organization, if you're an individual contributor at the front lines, the employee, that the more that you are hooked into what the organization actually does, the more engaging your work is likely going to be. I see the biggest separation when people in the front lines feel like they're not being heard, like that what they do doesn't matter, that their leadership thinks they're a dime a dozen. Like those are the things that get in the way of of enjoyment or engagement at those lower levels. So, but it's a complex issue that you bring up for sure.
Yeah, and I'm happy you mentioned before, one of the polls was about the team itself, and you just mentioned the engagement, and it is up also to the either a leader or the organization strategy itself to make sure that they build a system where these people that are doing maybe repetitive jobs still find a way to get engaged. And I've had conversations with employees where they were like, we're here for the salary, I'm at an operation level, and that's it. And I'm like, no, you're very social, so get more into problem solving with customers. Like you can always find a way to make that job have some task that this inner motivation comes and then helps them prioritize. We have some questions coming in, and I wanted to give them some time. So Emily here is asking about, can you clarify a little bit or focus a little bit more on the action items you had there? I think was the second one in the handout.
Yeah, the next actions. So I mentioned that a little bit in talking about the Pomodoro. It's basically that instead of having, a lot of us keep lists for various things, which is great, whether it's a to-do list or you're strategizing or brainstorming around something. But the more specific you can get in that list, the better you are to actually take action. So sometimes when people will just do a brain dump of like all the things that they have to do, sometimes it's work and home all combined, jumbled up. You might have something on that list that is just like really big. I think the example that David Allen talks about in his book is anniversary. Like he's describing one of his male clients having a big wedding anniversary come up, and all he writes is anniversary on that list, and he's going to stay in a state of of like amnesia, or not amnesia,
Correct.
But just kind of like it's like I don't know what to do. Like they have no idea what the first step is. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. It's intangible. So the idea is, if you're making lists, the more that you can think about the very next thing that needs to be done to move something forward, the more easy it is to deal with that item on your list. You feel better about it. So maybe with this example with an anniversary coming up, that you could ask, be more thoughtful when your wife is talking about X and such, like whatever that next action is, that you are thinking in terms of just the very next thing you have to do. Sometimes we're just thinking about the entire scope of something, and we get overwhelmed. So it's about just breaking things down. And even when you're on a new project and maybe it's very innovative and it feels like there's a lot of unknowns. You probably have the capacity already in you from your experience that you can do 80% of that, and you're going to figure out the rest along the way by just taking very small chunks and one step at a time.
Right. And that was actually the notes I wrote down when I read his book. I didn't even know you were mentioning about that book, but when you mentioned the right next step, that was really stuck in my head because it was kind of an aha moment. So it's not that something so impressive, but then when you think about it, we just don't start.
Right.
So
Yes.
we have Jeffrey here is, first of all, congratulations about the presentation. So I'm glad that they're liking it as well. My personal issue is saying is trying to manage the multiple roles, a father, husband, so whatever roles we have in and out of the workplace environment.
Yeah. Yep. It's a big challenge, and I think that taking a little bit of time to just, and not a lot of time, seriously, like, because I know that that's the biggest issue, is that we all only have, 168 hours. But even if you took, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, some period, and, when you start looking for these little tiny chunks, they start showing up. You end up having little bits of time someplace that you may not have realized before. But just thinking in really broad brush strokes, what you want in those various aspects of your life. And again, I don't think it's about doing everything that you could in all of those aspects. It's about, how you want to show up, how you would want someone to speak of you that you respect. And then you're just taking a step every day towards that. And, the things that derail us, like one of the things that's on that handout is our triggers down towards the bottom. And the triggers, this is where, God, my day's already been so long, and all I want to do is, fill in the blank. And sometimes there are things we could do in the evening at home that are better relaxers than others. I totally fall into this. I'm totally a victim of, the time my husband will turn on the TV and I get it's like a magnet or something in that room, and I am sucked into that space. But I am so much better off if I either take a shower, or sometimes I even take a bath. I know that a lot of us may not have that time, or may not even have a bathtub, but it's even just a short time, and it's restorative. I'm getting the type of thing that I think the TV is going to give me, but it's totally different outcome from it. So sometimes we're wasting our energy in things that suck us down even more. And I think that there's an opportunity there. So, so there could be more time and space and energy for those roles, perhaps if we looked at some of the things that are our trigger items that might bring us down a little bit. This too is a complicated one, and we're human, and sometimes we just want to sit on the couch. So,
and you mentioned at the beginning, just assessing where is this time going.
Exactly.
You might not even be aware that I'm wasting so much time on Instagram, whereas I was supposed to do. But I believe, and again, it goes back to sustainability, and especially with the roles that are outside of work environment. I lived in the US for 10 years, and I live in Europe for longer. Now I'm in Europe, and I feel like I have more time. So there is something that is going on in that continent that is, I'm not saying workaholic, but I think we need to remember to be continuous. The role, let's say, as a father, it might be a 5-minute, whatever that is, but fix a day, and that that's constantly happening, that continuous behavior, so the person feels that that's happening. It's my quality time, even though that could be something else, or agreeable with the person that you are dealing with, I believe.
Yes.
But I saw myself changing as a person as I moved countries, so there is something we need to manage differently.
Yes, in the U.S., workism, as they're calling it, is an issue here. And you're right, the assessment is perfect for that. Another way people do assessment is they just look at time going backwards and saying, okay, where are the major sinks, and
You mean the outcomes?
Well, no, I'm saying that sometimes as part of an assessment process, I'll have a client look at the last week or the last 3 days, and they'll notice things that they don't notice otherwise. It's it's similar to a financial budget, and I hate to bring in money, but we don't know where our money's going, right? And as a result, it's well, how come I don't have any for X, Y, and Z? I can say this because I know that consumer debt is a big issue also in the United States. But
Yeah.
but it's like once you like look back or you look at your statement going back 2 weeks, you're like, what was I thinking? You know, and you got to get really clear on, okay, what do I actually want to do in the long run that is really meaningful to me, and does it make sense that I'm kind of nickeling and diming all of these other things? So it's the same thing with time. You know, what are the really awesome things that I'd like to bring into my life, and are these nickeling and diming things as important? And things shift as you just begin to think about this differently. And you know, when I was first looking at my time, I had a hard time sitting on the front porch with my husband, but now it's because I felt I needed to be doing other things. But now it's like one of the most valuable times that we have together. And even if it's only for 15 minutes, I mean, I love that. And of course, being in Boston, will we actually be able to sit on the front porch anytime soon? I think maybe.
Of course, you will.
But yeah, it's just, you know, constantly going back to, you know, is this really what I want, and what do I need to tweak? And you might not be able to do it tomorrow, but you can kind of begin to move towards more of what you would like.
The next step.
Yes, I don't know if we have more questions. I do have a couple of final slides, but I think.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead, we have one more that's talking about how much planning is enough, and I think we're going towards agile thinking, because we can plan, and then by the time that you are executing, you need to change again. Some other priorities go on. So
yeah.
When do we do another reflection of where we stand and what we need to change?
It's a tough one. I think that you really, it's not about making lists, and it's not about the plan. It's about whether or not the plan is actually achieving the thing, you know, that we've defined, whether it's, you know, in our organization or at home. And I think it's very iterative, but I don't think you have to do it every day. I think that, you know, weekly, monthly, quarterly, you might do a bigger look, a bigger like 30,000 foot view of what's happening here. And, you know, does a big shift need to happen? And I did work with a client once. She felt like she was spending tons of time constantly reorganizing, reprioritizing. She was also in a very new role. So I think sometimes stage of life and transition can require more than that, you know, than you would want. But yeah, I think if you get too caught up in the calendar tool or the planning, that's certainly not affecting awesomeness either. So it's iterative. It really is.
Okay. Yeah, Linda, if you want to go ahead with your slides, because we'll close in about 4 minutes. I want you to be able to give us your final thoughts here.
Yeah, just so so 2 slides where I have final remarks on 2 slides forward. I just wanted to reiterate we really do have, you know, the potential to build capacity in key areas, whether it's within our organizations or at home. And sometimes it means taking things off the list or reframing and such. And really it all is towards increased fulfillment, success, maybe even a little fun, you know, more engagement in anything that we're endeavoring. You know, we're on this planet, I think, to do more than just be, you know, navigating work and life commitments all the time. So, you know, let's like make the most of it as we can. Can you see forward to the slide that says success is a sum of small efforts? Should be 3 slides forward. Okay, so this was a quote that I came across along the way of building my system and this business, and I really feel that it encapsulates the whole idea here, that success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in, day out. It's such a simple thing, but the success is, as you define it, hopefully not making yourself crazy trying to define it, just starting out simply and then doing something that's aligned with those things every day. So is the majority of your work day aligned with what your team or your group should be doing for the organization? And if it is, you know, that's awesome. And then same with the things that you've decided are important for your life at home, and how are you making that happen, and what do you need to reprioritize? And you know, our lives are increasingly complicated and complex, and navigating is not easy these days, especially in the United States. So hopefully that ebook, if you choose to have me send it to you, could be of further help in getting more out of all of this. So that concludes the content as far as I am going here.
Thank you so much, Linda. This is some information we need to. I mean, I'm glad we recorded because it's one of those things that you need to absorb it, because there is many tips, and you need to find, I believe, the one that works for you or the one that works for the situation itself.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to spend a little bit more time, which I'm gonna personally do, and go from there, one step at a time. So I would also like to thank Kiran for being here and always supporting with the webinar, the attendees who raised their questions. If you have other questions, the ebook, as Linda is mentioning before, is coming. You can reach her out. Today's presentation and recording will also be posted on our My ASQ community. So you go under ASQ Human Development Leadership Community. We have transitioned almost everything from the website, so make sure you go to the My ASQ community, as well as YouTube channel. Sometime this week you'll have a recording available there. Our next webinar is already scheduled. It will be on June 12th, and Ms. Deborah Coviello this time will be talking about reflective leadership and how is that critical to setting the quality strategy. There's an interesting approach to leadership in that webinar. Registration is ready. It can be done on My ASQ community as well. To get future automatic notifications, if you are not already signed up, you can sign up for the free newsletter you can get from our website, or you can just follow the LinkedIn page we have, and we'll always introduce the next webinars there. We do have a 1-minute kind of survey just to make sure that we get some feedback, and if we need to change anything, we take good care of that. So we do make continuous changes based on your feedback. So it will pop up on your screen if you are on a computer as soon as you close the webinar. If you are on the phone, that's fine. You'll receive a follow-up email within an hour. We'll have the link to it. We'll really appreciate your feedback there. As Kiran mentioned in the beginning, for those who have attended 40 minutes, you'll receive a separate email. I'll be sending a separate email from the follow-up email, which you can save as a PDF, and you can claim with ASQ your credit. Thank you again for your time today. We'll look forward to having you on our next webinar. Thanks, Lida, again, and thanks, Kiran.
Thank you.